What is going on, everyone? Before we get started with my Madden 23 franchise mode wish list, I want to let you know that one of my big goals for 2022 was to get all of my Madden content actually over to my other YouTube channel, TFG Plays, to keep this channel to NFL/NFL Draft Analysis and to get TFG Plays to 10,000 subscribers by the year 2022. With that said, this will actually be the last Madden video on this channel. So if you are interested in following my Madden rebuilds, reviews, future wish lists as well, head over to TFG Plays here on YouTube. You'll also help me reach that big goal of 10,000 subscribers. So I really appreciate you checking that out. And if you enjoyed this video, please make sure you hit that like button down below and comment what features you'd like to see for Madden 23. So this video comes at an interesting time because last week EA Sports actually had Madden 22 trending on social media for the wrong reasons, yet again, as it was reported that they've gone ahead and canceled several of their updates that they had promised for Madden 22 franchise mode. This, of course, following the events of last year's Fix Madden franchise movement that led to these promises in the first place is very disappointing and yet again emphasizes the need for a video just like this in the first place. Nobody likes being lied to, especially the customer of a product. And sadly, this feeling of EA falling short when it comes to the much needed development of franchise mode is a familiar feeling for Madden fans. Though I will admit, the game mode is in a much better state than it was at this time last year, which is good. EA still clearly needs to continue improving the amount of resources that it invests into franchise mode. Specifically speaking, investing in the quality and quantity of game engineers that work on franchise mode. The features that EA promised us got cut from Madden 22 because the development team fell behind after the scouting overhaul took longer than expected and because the game dropped with an overwhelming number of bugs. And to be honest, I understand the decision that EA made. You know, even myself, I'd rather they clean up these bugs than just release more buggy and unfinished features to the game, if it must be one or the other. But it does need to be said that above anything that I list in this video that we can put on a wish list, the number one thing EA can do to improve this game is to continue to add more and better engineers to their team so that they can truly get franchise mode to the state that we all want it to be in, because frankly right now they just can't work fast enough and good enough. So that's really the number one thing we all should be wishing for. And EA deserves to be called out on that. They are a AAA company. You should expect more from that. But now that that's been said, let's get into the part of the video you guys are all here for, the features, the wish list. So as with every year, I make this video based off of what I want to see, but also based off a lot of the conversations I've had with the many Madden players out there. I also make this list as something that EA should be, realistically and reasonably able to accomplish in one development cycle. I try to emphasize the most pressing features and issues that should be addressed as opposed to just, listing the hundreds and hundreds of things that could or should be added to Madden. And that means starting with the big topic features, the box features, if you will. And my first box feature I request for Madden 23 is a comprehensive overhaul of free agency and player acquisition. And for what it's worth, I'm actually very optimistic that we're going to get this feature this year. So what we're talking about here is a complete overhaul of the player acquisition system paired with a complete rebuild of the off-season free agency system. A system that unfortunately has been the same since the Bush administration. So with free agency, it's time we do away with this points system. As a starter, I'd like points to be hidden entirely and for a player's interest to be split into 3 or 5 categories such as interested, very interested, not interested. You get the point. Nobody should be able to know exactly where they stand with a player's intent of signing with the team. And there should be way more variables in the player's decision of which team he ultimately decides to play for. What I'd like to see is more of a recruiting process, actually similar to what NCAA 13 had, where you have actual conversations with free agents. Obviously, money talks. That should be everyone's priority. But you should be able to do much more to attract a player to join your team. You should be able to make promises to a player regarding playing time or statistical production, promises that can backfire on you. see a loss of player morale, or maybe the player even requests a trade through the scenario engine if you fail to meet the promises that you made to the player during free agency. You should be able to send your own players to go and speak with free agents, to recruit them and to increase their interest in your team. You should also be able to make appeals to a player regarding your team's prestige, their market size, team goals, how well the player fits your scheme. All these things should be in the mix much more prevalently than they currently are. Of course, EA should also be utilizing the new staff skill tree system that we got for Madden 22 by adding plenty of new perks that can increase your own recruiting style, success rate with certain decisions you make, all of that stuff. This system would have a huge impact on, of course, the immersiveness of the offseason, but it'll also improve the entire life of franchise, because the promise system especially, because you're going to need to meet certain goals that you promise to players to keep up team morale or to prevent a player from requesting a trade. Promises and the ability to appeal to players in these different kinds of ways also should be applied to the player re-signing process that is used during the regular season. So it's not just an off-season overhaul here. This applies to just player acquisition as a whole and contract extensions. Now, this system would be the bones of this new player acquisition system, but there's a handful of details missing from Madden right now related to the way contracts and the salary cap work in the real NFL that need to be worked on in Madden, so that this new free agency system that we get doesn't end up, just representing a fantasy world. Because ultimately, the majority of us want franchise mode to accurately represent the real NFL. These details that I'm talking about, that I'll list in just a second, they've been said time and time again. The Madden team knows damn well what these things are and what needs to be added. So it's simply a matter of them getting the time and resources that they need to implement this stuff. So I've got a whole list of details that need to be looked at for player acquisition and the way the league just operates inside Madden. Number one here is the ability to front or backload contracts based on where the team wants to distribute cap. That's a pretty straightforward thing, but it's been missing in Madden. You give the guy whatever years he wants, whatever money he wants, and it gets distributed a certain way. Well, in real life, you can front load a deal if you've got cap space this year. If you're waiting to pay your franchise quarterback a bunch of money next year, you can pay the guy now so that you don't have to deal with his cap later. It's a big thing in real life. It needs to be in Madden. Number two, the ability to negotiate with free agents, not just in the offseason, but during the season. I don't want to see any more of these vanilla one-year deals for every free agent during the season that's just directly correlated to their overall. That's just not how it works. And then my number three item, and this ties into my number 2 point there with the in-season free agents, but it also just applies to all free agents. And what I'm getting at here is to all of those free agents that end up sitting on the market, those unwanted free agents that don't get what they're asking for, that don't get their quote-unquote market value. We've all experienced, at the end of free agency and into the regular season, there's just a ton of pretty good players that simply just don't get picked up and they're just sitting there. In real life, those guys are taking cheap one-year deals. Everyone's lowballing them to see if they just want to play on like a one-year prove-it deal, and that's what I want to see in Madden. So by the end of free agency, and especially into the regular season, if a player isn't receiving offers, he should almost always sign to a one-year league minimum contract, just as we see in real life so often. Now, what's important here is if this is added, computer teams absolutely need to be programmed to get in the mix on these offers as well, so that you balance the game mode, because otherwise, user players are just going to have a serious advantage signing these guys when the computers aren't aware that you can do that. Number 4 is pretty simple: undrafted free agent contracts. All those guys that go undrafted, they end up in that same free agent cesspool where everyone gets a one-year deal. If they're a free agent rookie, they should be getting 3-year deals, It's how it works in real life. Why is it not in Madden? Number 5, 5th-year options. As of this recording, Madden 22 actually took 5th-year options for first-round rookies out of the game, as it was dysfunctional. They were having bugs with it. I think they're working on it, but fix it. Get that back in the game for Madden 23. Number 6, contract restructuring. Somewhat similar to the ability to front load and back load contracts, but a little different. In real life, teams are constantly giving players guaranteed money up front in order to push the salary cap into the future. Those all-in teams, the Bucks, the Chiefs, the Saints, we see it all around the league. Given the frequency that we see that in real life and the impact that it has on the landscape of the NFL and team building in the NFL, it is time that we see this in Madden. Number 7, rollover salary cap. This is something not a lot of people are aware of, but it is huge in the NFL. You want to know why the Browns are able to sign all these guys? It's because they did years and years of rollover cap. So in real life, NFL teams actually get to carry over any unused salary cap into the next season. This plays a massive part in IRL team building. So again, let's see that in Madden. It'd be a huge decision-making point for your franchise modes. Do you go all in? Do you not carry over any salary cap? Or are you rebuilding and you want to stockpile a bunch of salary cap for 2-3 years from now? Teams are making those decisions in real life. We should be able to do that in franchise mode. And lastly, compensatory draft picks. So in real life, teams are awarded draft picks when their best players receive big free agent contracts. This again plays a massive part in real life team building decisions. Do you sign your guy back, or do you let him go and get that 3rd or 4th round compensatory pick and save some cap space, create some rollover cap? This stuff all plays together, so it's time all this stuff is reflected in Madden. So that's actually a lot of stuff, and as sad as it is to say, based on what EA has shown us, everything I just mentioned would likely take up the majority of their time and resources for this development cycle. Hire more engineers. And though some may suggest some more flashy box features based on the conversations I've had, things like a pregame show or training camp, those are definitely things that would be good for franchise mode. The reason I would prioritize what I have to this point is that what I'm requesting make up the meat and bones of franchise mode. EA can add all of the window dressing they want, a pregame show, training camp, but until stuff like everything I've just mentioned when it relates to free agency, contracts, salary cap, until that stuff is cleaned up and accurately resembles real life, they can put all this stuff in the window for that window dressing as much as they want, but it's just going to be a sham for what's actually inside the store, if that makes sense. Which is why the rest of my wish list, for the most part, consists of a lot of tuning to the bones of franchise mode. And not other box feature stuff. Actually, free agency is my one box feature this year, because I think there's a lot that goes with it that they're going to need to work on. So my next request is something that is not going to come as a surprise to many of you that have followed this channel and watched these wish lists. It's something I've been passionately requesting for years, and that is updated positional terminology, specifically with front 7 defensive players. The NFL no longer speaks in terms of defensive end, defensive tackle, and outside linebacker when referring to the league on a macro scale. Now, of course, within individual schemes, of course, those positions still exist, and that doesn't need to go anywhere. But when it comes to team needs, player acquisition, and draft selections, specifically by the computers, where players line up on the field, awards, Pro Bowl selections, among a bunch of other issues, it's time EA updates its positional terminology to that beyond that of the NFL in 2005. That means listing players as edge, interior defensive lineman, and linebacker. Far too often, you'll see computer teams signing a 220-pound linebacker to play 3-4 edge outside linebacker when they should be 240, 250 pounds. Because that guy played 4-3 outside backer for his last team. Far too often, you'll see a team draft a 250-pound defensive end and stick him as a base 3 technique inside the tackles because that team has no idea of differentiating what sort of defensive end he is, or vice versa, bringing in a 300-pound defensive end to then line him up on the edge because he's, again, coming from a 3-4 team. This is also going to accomplish something the NFL wants from Madden and help educate its players on what these positional terms mean as well. It's also going to improve gameplay to other modes like Ultimate Team and Head-to-Head, where people love to exploit the game's indifference to proper defensive alignment. This could be done by simply changing the position names inside the roster management menu, then designating where they're supposed to go inside each team's scheme on their depth chart. You could also add a player trait to every player that notifies the game which of the 3 front 7 positions he's supposed to play, be it linebacker, edge, or defensive line inside. Honestly, I don't care what has to be done to fix it, but this crap has ruined far too many franchise files. I know myself and many people I've talked to are exhausted of having to take hours to manually edit players, make trades or signings for teams at the start of every season just so they properly use the players inside the damn game. Many I've talked to heavily agree with me on this one. I don't know why EA has been so resistant to update this, but it's freaking time. My next item I'd like to see, you'll be happy to know, is more of a feature than a fix, and that is an off-season training program. Because I don't think it's realistic to add an entire training camp feature yet for the next Madden in this development cycle. This is a more simple feature that should be fairly simple to implement, and it's a step towards a more dynamic player development system in the off-season. Every off-season, users would get a set amount of points that they can then distribute towards certain camps and player focuses. These options will range from attribute boosts, the ability to earn certain traits that are missing, such as uses possession catch or uses finesse moves, as well as the ability to get players to lose or gain weight so that they better fit a different position if you want to make a change, say a receiver to tight end, which is something we've seen a lot of in the NFL these days. And then you can even tie this into the skill tree and perhaps earn the ability to get more points to spend every offseason. Anytime you can kind of tie features together, I think is really cool now that we're getting more and more features in Madden. So this is something we've created in my own 32-man league, TFGO, which we're recruiting, by the way. The link is in the description for the application if you want to check it out. But this is one of the smoothest and coolest things in the league, and it's just a great way to improve the player development system. And to be honest, I want to keep this wish list realistic for what EA can and should be able to accomplish in one development cycle. So the vast majority of my wish list is already done, right there. But I will, however, just list a few of the more pressing bugs and tweaks that EA should be taking a look at. And as well, I want to talk about some of the good things they're doing and what they can build upon from what they're already doing. So first off here is the file share system. This doesn't affect every user, but it has affected many, and those that have experienced how broken the file share is know how frustrating it can be. As it currently sits, the file share is actually working. But I kid you not, for 4+ Maddens straight, there have been an embarrassment of issues with this system. They range from error messages when trying to either upload or download files, and we're talking about draft classes, rosters, playbooks, you name it. They have had a broken profanity filter for years that it can either corrupt or disable files, among other just strange, weird bugs. So I beg EA to please clean up the file share system. These issues are almost guaranteed to pop up again next year if they don't take a look at it, because it's just, from a technical standpoint, clearly broken. And while we're here, please somehow find a way to make these files cross-compatible between PC, Xbox, PlayStation. You've got this nice draft system now. Let us all share the draft classes with everyone, not just the people on your console, especially right now where you got old gen, next gen, PC. There's 5 consoles out there right now. Only 20% of the people can use one person's file, so please figure out a way to make that happen. Next up, I'm going to stay on the topic of drafts here. We're going to talk about something I want to see for auto-generated draft classes, which is something that's really important with the new scouting overhaul. So I'm going to admit the auto-generated classes have actually come a long way over the last year or so, to the point that I can actually use them, but there's still some weird, just kind of wackiness with them at times. So there's 2 things that I really want EA to take a look at with auto-generated draft classes before Madden 23 drops. So the number one is there's just weird body types with players in the secondary, especially. But you're talking about a lot of 5'9" corners that go in the first round. Teams look for length at that position. I don't think we've ever seen a 5'9" corner there. And then there's a bunch of 6'4" safeties. You get a bunch of these like 230-pound receivers. Just the body types are still a little off. So I want EA to take a look at that, draw from historical data, and make sure that's more accurate. Really at every position, but secondary and receiver and tight end, I would say, are the 4 position groups where you really notice it. And then my second issue was basically already hit on, but I need to regurgitate it here, and that relates to positional terminology. The whole thing is just a mess, as I described earlier. Teams draft big-bodied guys to play the wrong position. They draft lighter guys to play the wrong position. The game just can't identify who's supposed to play where. So at the end of the day, I need EA to take a look at how teams identify that, how they put them in the right spot, and then are the players generated in the correct archetype to play in those positions. The whole thing is just a disaster. It's getting a slightly better, but they need to take an actual look at that and improve that. And then while we're on the topic of draft, EA also needs to take another look at draft logic, of course, just in general on a macro scale, but specifically with computers drafting quarterbacks. This is still a big issue. You'll still see some really head-shaking quarterback selections. For example, I've seen the Bills and the Ravens both draft quarterbacks within the first 2 seasons, even though they both have 90-plus overall quarterbacks on mega contracts. So that's just one simple thing that can actually really ruin a franchise that it needs to be corrected. A couple other tiny adjustments I'd like to see relate to some player development stuff. So I'd like to see breakouts for offensive linemen and the ability for offensive linemen to go up in a development trait for either making the Pro Bowl or winning an award. It's such an important position, but right now their career development is entirely rooted in what development trait do you get on draft day. So making that deeper, we're talking about the development of offensive linemen. Potentially you could integrate it with the next gen stats if you could ever accurately track pressures or pass rush win rate. That'd be an amazing feature. I'd also like to see the addition of a best tight end award, and of course separate interior defensive linemen, edge players, and linebackers when it comes to awards and the Pro Bowl. Massive topic for me. The other feature I want to bring up is home field advantage. We're kind of getting into more of like what they're currently doing and what they can do with the features they have. I love that they're attempting to make home field more important in Madden, but this feature with the momentum factor and home field advantage, it just didn't work. They either need to make it a toggleable feature for next Madden, take a serious look at improving it and making it more realistic, or just scrap it entirely. Like, I don't know whose idea it was to make it so certain teams will be able to see the route of the number 1 receiver on the other team before the play is snapped, but that was just a miserable concept from the get-go. The boosts in this feature, they're either hardly noticeable or way overpowered. The overall execution of the momentum factor was just really poorly executed. So there should be home field advantages in Madden, but this just wasn't it, in my opinion. And then I want to end the video on a positive note here. The last thing I'm going to do is ask for the continued growth of the good systems that EA has added for us over the last few years. For a game that's infamous for adding features only to later remove them, I want to say that I'm really happy with the features we got last Madden. For their first season, I think weekly game plan, coaching skill trees, and the scouting overhaul are excellent additions to Madden franchise mode, and I encourage EA to spend as much time as possible to continue adding depth and polish to these features. Specifically, the coaching skill trees, seriously, the more skills and the more depth you can add there, the better. And keep tying them into other features. Like I feel like the ground is you've laid a good groundwork, but there's even more that they can add to the coaching skill trees to increase that depth, as long as it's balanced, of course. I also have seen so much great growth with the scenario engine. That thing was so mediocre and stale when it first came out, but it has come a long way, so them continuing to develop that, it's good stuff, man. I think they are genuinely building towards the franchise mode that we want. And that is all I've got Please do leave your comments down below, everyone. Where do you agree? What features would you prioritize over the things I've got in this video for Madden 23 franchise mode? And please do hit that like button. It really does help me out. Share the video, and do please check out TFG Plays, my other Madden YouTube channel, where all of my Madden content is going to be moving forward. So I'll see you guys over on TFG Plays. I'll see you back here on this channel soon. Cheers, everyone. Hope you enjoyed. Peace.